You will reach moments in life where strength is not optional, where comfort disappears, where motivation goes silent, and where you stand alone with your thoughts wondering how much more you can endure. And this is where the Stoic path begins. Not when life is easy, but when life is heavy. Because Stoicism was never created for comfort. It was created for survival, for clarity in chaos, and for those who refuse to break when the world applies pressure. Endurance is not loud. It does not announce itself. It lives quietly inside the person who wakes up tired yet continues, who is misunderstood yet remains calm, who is hurting yet chooses discipline instead of surrender. And this is the core of Stoic strength. Not the absence of pain, but the mastery of response. Marcus Aurelius wrote reminders to himself while ruling an empire under war, plague, and betrayal, not to escape suffering, but to remain rational within it. And this is the lesson most people miss, that life owes no one ease, fairness, or explanation, but it gives everyone a choice, to complain or to endure. The Stoic chooses endurance not because it is easy, but because emotional resistance only multiplies suffering, and the moment you stop asking, why me, and start asking, what now, you reclaim control over your life. Endurance is not passive acceptance, it is active discipline. It is waking up each day, knowing you may not feel strong, but choosing to act strong anyway, because feelings are temporary and character is permanent. And the Stoics understood this deeply, that the mind must lead even when the body resists, that consistency matters more than comfort, and that discipline must exist independent of mood. Life will remove people, opportunities, youth, and certainty. And when it does, panicking will not bring them back. Anger will not heal the loss. And despair will only consume what energy you have left. But reason. Reason remains. And reason is the Stoic's weapon, allowing you to respond rather than react, to observe rather than collapse, to continue rather than quit. You may feel unseen, unappreciated, or forgotten, but endurance teaches a deeper truth, that value is not created by recognition, but by persistence, and that many of the strongest transformations happen in silence, where no one is watching and no one is applauding. Yet the work continues anyway. The Stoic accepts loneliness as training, hardship as instruction, and suffering as refinement, understanding that the fire that threatens to destroy can also shape what is unbreakable. And the question is never whether pain will come, but whether you will allow it to dominate your mind, because pain enters through the body, but suffering enters through interpretation. And interpretation is always within your control. Endurance means staying grounded when emotions rise, staying rational when thoughts become dark, and staying committed when results are delayed, because most people do not fail from lack of ability, but from lack of patience. Quitting too early because discomfort feels personal when in truth discomfort is simply part of becoming something greater. The Stoic path does not promise happiness. It promises strength, and strength creates peace that pleasure never can. Because a person who learns to endure no longer fears circumstances, no longer depends on external approval, and no longer collapses when life becomes uncertain. This is the path of endurance, quiet, slow, demanding, and transformative. And if you are still standing after everything you have faced, then recognize this. You are already stronger than you realize, and the Stoic path has already begun within you. Endurance deepens when expectations die, because much of human suffering comes not from pain itself, but from the belief that life should have been easier, fairer, or kinder, and Stoicism removes this illusion by teaching that life owes nothing beyond existence itself. Once you accept that hardship is not personal, that struggle is not punishment, and that suffering is not failure, you stop negotiating with reality and start aligning with it, discovering that strength grows fastest when resistance disappears. The Stoic does not waste energy wishing for different conditions, because wishes do not change circumstances, actions do. And this is why discipline is sacred in Stoicism, as it allows progress even when hope feels distant, because discipline does not require optimism, it requires commitment. When days become repetitive, when effort goes unnoticed, and when results remain invisible, the untrained mind panics, but the Stoic mind remains steady, understanding that progress is often invisible before it becomes undeniable, and that consistency is the bridge between effort and outcome. The Stoics believe that fortune shifts like wind, sometimes favoring you, sometimes opposing you. But your character must remain unmoved by both praise and loss, because a life controlled by external reward is fragile, and a person who depends on recognition will collapse without it. Independence of mind is the ultimate armor, allowing you to work without applause, suffer without complaint, and remain humble without weakness. Stoicism teaches you to stop asking, "When will this end?" and start asking, "How must I endure this well?" Because endings are not guaranteed, but standards are, and even suffering can be carried with dignity. Moments will come when exhaustion feels heavier than pain, when even discipline feels distant, but this is where Stoic maturity forms. In choosing to act correctly even when enthusiasm is absent, because purpose outlives motivation and character outlives emotion. A Stoic does not seek to escape difficulty. They seek to become capable within it, knowing that capability grants freedom even in hardship. When you realize that nothing external can corrupt your values unless you allow it, fear loses its grip, because fear survives only where dependency exists. Detach from outcomes, commit to effort, and you gain control without obsession, peace without resignation, and strength without anger, which is the highest accomplishment of endurance. To remain internally ordered while the outer world remains chaotic. The Stoic path continues by teaching restraint over desire, because desire without discipline becomes a chain, binding your mood, your confidence, and your peace to outcomes you do not control. And most people live enslaved by wanting more approval, more comfort, more certainty, without realizing that contentment is not the absence of ambition, but the mastery of appetite. Stoicism does not reject ambition. It refines it, shifting focus from external reward to internal excellence, from chasing pleasure to cultivating virtue, and from craving ease to earning resilience. When desires multiply unchecked, disappointment becomes inevitable. But when desire is restrained, satisfaction becomes stable, because the Stoic does not measure success by accumulation, but by alignment with principles. The greatest power is not getting what you want, but wanting only what is reasonable, necessary, and honorable. And this recalibration frees you from constant agitation. Envy dissolves when comparison ends, anxiety fades when expectations shrink, and peace grows when fulfillment is no longer outsourced to circumstance. The Stoics warned that uncontrolled desire makes people impatient, impulsive, and fragile, reacting emotionally to delay and denial. But the disciplined mind remains balanced, willing to wait, willing to work, and willing to proceed without guarantee. Learning to deny yourself comfort today builds security tomorrow, because hardship voluntarily accepted is less damaging than hardship imposed unexpectedly. By practicing restraint in food, pleasure, impulse, and speech, the Stoic trains dominance over self rather than dependence on environment, understanding that self-control is freedom in its purest form. When life tests you, and it will, restraint allows you to respond with clarity rather than desperation, patience rather than bitterness. And this calm authority over desire transforms suffering into training, delay into discipline, and absence into strength, shaping a mind that no longer collapses under longing, but remains grounded in sufficiency. Silence is not emptiness. It is exposure. And this is why most people fear it, because when noise disappears and distractions fade, the mind is forced to confront itself. And Stoicism teaches that this confrontation is not a threat, but a necessity. For only in silence can truth be heard, and only in solitude can character be shaped. The Stoics did not seek isolation to escape the world, but to prepare for it, understanding that a person who cannot be alone cannot be stable, and a person who cannot tolerate their own thoughts will forever depend on external voices for direction and validation. Solitude reveals weaknesses that noise hides, impatience, insecurity, unresolved fear, but it also reveals strength that distraction suppresses, clarity, discipline, and self-awareness. And the Stoic learns to sit with discomfort without fleeing, knowing that endurance of silence trains the mind to remain composed under pressure. Marcus Aurelius wrote privately not for an audience, but to correct himself, to align his actions with reason. And this practice of self-dialogue is a Stoic weapon, because reflection strengthens the inner authority that no opinion can weaken. When you remove constant stimulation, cravings soften, emotional reactions slow, and focus sharpens, allowing rational thought to guide action rather than impulse. Stoicism teaches that unnecessary talk weakens discipline, because every careless word is a release of control, while silence preserves energy, intention, and dignity. Speaking less is not submission. It is power. It allows observation, restraint, and strategic choice. And this is why Stoics do not argue emotionally, defend excessively, or explain unnecessarily. They conserve attention and respond only when action is required. Solitude also detaches you from the addictive cycle of approval, because when no one is watching, liking, praising, or judging, you are forced to answer one question honestly. Are your actions aligned with your values? And this accountability is far more demanding than public validation. Strength built in solitude transfers outward, creating calm under pressure, patience during delay, and decisiveness in uncertainty, because the mind trained in silence does not panic when noise returns. Many people mistake isolation for weakness, But Stoicism reframes it as preparation, because battle is easier when the inner world is organized, and peace is more durable when it comes from within rather than from circumstances. By willingly entering silence, the Stoic becomes immune to chaos, because a mind that can stand alone does not collapse in crowds, and a person who has faced themselves has little left to fear from the world. Emotional control is the foundation of Stoic freedom, because a person who cannot govern their reactions will always be governed by others. And the Stoics understood that insults, disrespect, and misunderstanding are inevitable in a world driven by ego, insecurity, and ignorance. But suffering is not inevitable unless the mind cooperates with offense. When someone attacks your character, ignores your effort, or disrespects your presence, the instinctive response is anger or hurt. Yet Stoicism trains a different response. Pause, examine, and choose reason over impulse, because words only have the power you assign to them. An insult is meaningless unless you accept it as truth, and a Stoic does not accept judgment from unqualified sources. Epictetus taught that when someone speaks badly of you, remember that they act according to their understanding, not yours, and this realization instantly restores calm, because you stop personalizing behavior that was never personal. Emotional restraint is not suppression. It is discipline, the ability to feel without being ruled, to observe emotion as information rather than command, and to refuse immediate reaction in favor of deliberate response. The Stoic knows that reacting emotionally hands control away, while restraint preserves authority. Most conflicts escalate not due to serious offense, but due to wounded pride. And pride is one of the greatest obstacles to inner peace. By releasing the need to defend ego, explain intentions, or correct every misunderstanding, you free yourself from endless emotional labor. Silence after insult unsettles those who seek reaction, because restraint denies them reward, and dignity remains intact when provocation fails. Stoicism teaches that reputation is external and unstable, while character is internal and stable, and only one deserves protection. When someone criticizes you truthfully, accept it gratefully and adjust. When criticism is false, dismiss it peacefully, because anger toward lies grants them power they do not deserve. Emotional immunity is built through practice, through deliberately delaying reaction, through mindful breathing, and through reminding yourself that external events cannot damage internal value. Over time, insults lose their sting, disrespect loses its influence, and offense becomes information rather than injury. The Stoic does not become cold. They become clear, choosing peace over conflict, composure over chaos, and strength over validation, because a mind that remains calm under insult cannot be shaken by circumstance, and that calm becomes an unspoken authority no argument can overpower. Stoicism teaches that urgency is not panic, but clarity, born from the quiet awareness that time is limited and life is fragile. And this awareness of mortality is not meant to create fear, but precision. Because when you remember that death is inevitable, distractions lose importance and purpose becomes sharper. The Stoics practiced memento mori, the daily reflection on death, not to become morbid, but to remain focused, humble, and disciplined understanding that every wasted day is a day permanently lost. Most people live as if time is infinite, postponing discipline, delaying growth, and negotiating with procrastination. But the Stoic recognizes that tomorrow is not promised, and therefore action must be taken today, not when conditions improve, not when motivation appears, but when reason demands it. Awareness of death removes entitlement, resentment, and impatience. Because you stop expecting life to conform to your comfort and start valuing it for its opportunity to act virtuously within uncertainty. Purpose in Stoicism is not defined by fame, wealth, or recognition, but by alignment with nature, reason, and contribution, doing what is within your role to the best of your ability while accepting outcomes with detachment. When work feels heavy and progress feels slow, the Stoic remembers that the clock is always moving forward. And this remembrance transforms effort into responsibility rather than burden. There is no room for self-pity when time is scarce. No. Space for constant distraction when attention is precious, and no justification for abandoning discipline when life itself is temporary. Mortality also humbles pain, because suffering, too, is finite, and endurance becomes easier when you understand that even hardship will pass, just as pleasure passes, just as youth passes, and just as the present moment dissolves into memory. Stoic urgency creates consistent action without anxious speed, focus without obsession, and discipline without despair, guiding you to act fully in the present while releasing attachment to future outcomes. To live as if every day could be the last is not to rush recklessly, but to act honestly, speak intentionally, and work without delay, because the Stoic does not wait for life to slow down. They organize themselves internally to meet life as it is, choosing purpose over comfort, responsibility over avoidance, and meaning over distraction, until action becomes a form of respect for the limited time granted to them. Pain is not an interruption to life. It is a requirement of it. And the Stoics understood that every meaningful transformation passes through discomfort, loss, and failure, not as punishment, but as instruction, because ease never reveals character, but adversity always does. Failure shatters illusions, strips away false identity, and forces confrontation with reality. And while this moment breaks many people, it refines the Stoic, who sees collapse not as the end of identity, but as the beginning of reconstruction. When plans fail, when effort goes unrewarded, and when identity tied to success dissolves, the untrained mind panics. But Stoicism restores order by reminding you that worth is not measured by outcome, but by effort aligned with virtue. Losing external status, relationships, or direction does not mean losing value. It means regaining freedom from dependency on unstable things. The Stoic does not deny pain, but refuses to dramatize it, understanding that prolonged suffering is often the result of resistance rather than intensity, and that acceptance slows pain spread into unnecessary misery. Rebuilding after failure requires patience, because identity must now be rooted internally rather than externally. And this slow reconstruction builds resilience that success alone cannot provide. Stoicism teaches that setbacks test commitment more than capacity, and that many people abandon themselves not because they are incapable, but because they cannot tolerate delay, disappointment, or discomfort. Pain becomes meaningful when it reveals weakness to be corrected rather than shame to be hidden, and reflection transforms mistakes into material for growth. The Stoic does not rush recovery, using failure as a mirror rather than a sentence, asking not, "Why did this happen?" but "What does this demand from me now?" Through this approach, pain loses its power to define the future, becoming a chapter rather than the entire story. An identity shifts from being dependent on success to being grounded in endurance, discipline, and adaptability. When you rebuild yourself on principles rather than outcomes, failure becomes survivable, pain becomes finite, and your sense of self becomes unshakable, because anything built on virtue can bend without breaking, and anything tested by adversity returns stronger, clearer, and more self-directed than before. Consistency is the quiet discipline that transforms intention into identity, and the Stoics believe that a well-ordered life depends not on bursts of motivation, but on repeated, deliberate action guided by reason, because motivation is unstable while routine is reliable. Building structure in your day removes dependence on mood, protecting progress from emotional fluctuation. And this is why the Stoics emphasize daily practice, morning preparation, evening reflection, and continuous self-correction, understanding that character is not formed by dramatic moments, but by ordinary decisions repeated without exception. Routine creates inner authority, the confidence that comes from keeping promises to yourself regardless of external conditions. And this authority cannot be borrowed, displayed, or announced. It is earned slowly through consistency over time. When you follow a structured routine, distractions lose power, excuses weaken, and direction becomes clearer, because your actions no longer require negotiation. They follow principle. Stoicism teaches that order in life mirrors order in mind, and that chaos in habits creates chaos in thought. Discipline practiced privately strengthens control publicly, enabling calm leadership over self during uncertainty. Consistency becomes especially valuable when enthusiasm fades, progress stalls, and recognition disappears, because routine sustains effort when emotion cannot. The Stoic does not wait to feel ready. They act according to schedule, knowing that clarity often follows action rather than preceding it. Through consistent effort, small improvements accumulate, an identity shift from someone who tries to someone who does, from someone who hopes to someone who commits. Inner authority formed through discipline resists temptation, distraction, and persuasion, because confidence rooted in action is deeply stable. By honoring routine, even when inconvenient, the Stoic builds a life that operates from internal command rather than external influence, allowing progress to continue uninterrupted by doubt, mood, or circumstance. Over time, consistency becomes more than behavior. It becomes reputation, the quiet proof of seriousness visible not through words, but through unbroken action. And this makes the Stoics self-directed, resilient, and reliable in a world dominated by impulse and inconsistency. Detachment from people is not indifference. It is independence. And Stoicism draws a clear line between caring responsibly and depending emotionally, because when your peace relies on approval, inclusion, or validation, your stability becomes fragile, constantly vulnerable to opinion, neglect, or misunderstanding. The Stoics understood that humans are social by nature, yet warned against surrendering authority over inner life to external judgment, teaching that admiration is unstable, praise is temporary, and rejection is unavoidable, making emotional independence essential for clarity and endurance. Attachment to how others perceive you creates anxiety, because perception is outside your control, and resentment follows when effort is not recognized. But the Stoic redirects energy inward, focusing on intention rather than reception, effort rather than applause. This shift restores calm, because peace no longer depends on factors manipulated by chance or preference. The desire to be liked weakens honesty, leading individuals to adapt values to acceptance. But Stoic integrity requires consistency of character regardless of audience. Detachment also reduces emotional exhaustion, because you stop over-explaining, justifying, or defending yourself, recognizing that understanding is not guaranteed and agreement is not owed. When criticism arises, the Stoic evaluates truth rather than tone, correcting behavior where necessary and dismissing venom where false, maintaining balance. Without bitterness, the more detached you become from approval, the more authentic and stable your presence becomes, because you are no longer negotiating identity for acceptance. Paradoxically, this independence often increases respect, not because respect is sought, but because self-possession commands it naturally. Detachment frees you from disappointment caused by unrealistic expectations of people, allowing engagement without illusion and connection without dependency. Stoicism does not isolate you from others. It anchors you within yourself, enabling cooperation without compromise and connection without emotional surrender, so that relationships enrich life without controlling it, and approval becomes optional rather than essential. The Stoic path concludes not in knowledge alone, but in the mastery of life through disciplined action, self-awareness, and unwavering principle, because wisdom is meaningless without practice, and philosophy is powerless without embodiment. After enduring pain, resisting desire, embracing solitude, mastering emotion, confronting mortality, rebuilding identity, and cultivating consistency, the Stoic emerges with clarity, purpose, and authority over self, understanding that life cannot be controlled, but the mind can, and that true freedom is the independence of judgment, the calm in chaos, and the resilience that allows you to persist without complaint. The final lesson is integration, to merge understanding with habit, reflection with action, thought with deed, creating a life where virtue is habitual, decisions are deliberate, and distractions are inconsequential. The Stoic recognizes that life will continue to test, challenge, and punish, but the soul, trained in reason, tempered by endurance, and anchored in principle, remains unshakable, because external events cannot touch the essence of a disciplined mind. Let this truth resonate deeply. You are not your failures, your pain, your losses, or the opinions of others. You are the conscious choice to act rightly, the silent observer of thought, the architect of habits, and the resilient witness of circumstance. This integration of Stoic practice transforms ordinary life into mastery, ordinary moments into preparation, ordinary suffering into strength, an ordinary time and a legacy. As the day ends and reflection deepens, you see that nothing can rob you of what is internal, because virtue, reason, and discipline are permanently yours, immune to fortune, impervious to insult, and eternal beyond circumstance. Carry this awareness forward. Every action, every thought, every choice is an opportunity to reinforce your inner citadel, and each moment of deliberate endurance adds brick by brick to a life unbreakable, purposeful, and free. And when you finally rest, you do so knowing that you have trained not for comfort, recognition, or fleeting pleasure, but for mastery of yourself. And this mastery, once achieved, is the true reward of the Stoic life.